of youth. And in the second session, we want to reflect on the role of intercultural and interreligious dialogue and education to build security and cohesion. And so let me first introduce Honorable Silvia Costa. She will give her opening remarks for this session. And she's a European parliamentarian, chair of the Committee on Culture and Education. Born in Florence, Italy, she has been a professional journalist, former city councillor, member of the School and Culture Committees, member of the Italian Chamber of Deputies in the International Affairs and Culture, Science and Education Committees, former Deputy Minister for University, Scientific and Technological Research, Regional Minister for Education, Access to Study and Training in the Lazio region. And currently, that's enough. Yes, currently in her second term.
My age.
So let us welcome Honorable Silvia Costa.
Our moderator, Mrs. Van der Ven. I thank you so much, my dear colleague Fabio Zanzanonato. Many come to the club because so many people at this hour in Brussels is not easy. So it depends on the subject, but also on the organization. So because you are very sensitive for this. So I'm very glad to be here. Sorry because I would like to hear the previous panel that for me was absolutely impossible, but I hope that we will receive some documents, some report on this because I'm very, very interested now. Good afternoon to everybody. Speaking on such a delicate issue today, let me say, referring to the previous panel, because I know this matter, because also we organize some hearings on this with many women organizations and social organizations, that I totally agree on the special role that women are in the prevention of youth radicalization, social radicalization, and I remember also that the day after, just this mention linked to the previous panel that allowed me to say it, that the day after the attack in Brussels last 22nd March, along the tones of the article published and the war span, my attention was caught by some articles which focused on the role of women in the situation. And a standing reportage that was published on the Italian magazine Espresso on the relationship of young terrorists with their mothers in Molenbeek and others in Belgium particularly impressed me. The focus of the reportage was on the mothers of these young men who had suddenly decided to leave their families and their home country. Most of them were in fact, as you know, on Belgian nationality to join the Daesh. The reportage showed the central role played by these mothers in fighting against the silence which protects the jihadists. In doing so, as the Minister for Education of the Molenbeek Commune, Annalisa Gavaletta, stressed, they bring culture in schools, giving the battle a cultural educational dimension, exactly like the Italian judge Falcone and Borsellino, the famous judge killed by mafia in Italy, in Sicily, used to do against the mafias in the 90s. That's just this little sentence to connect this the previous one and to underline that I totally agree with the subject that you chose to open this interesting initiative. Regarding the sensitive issue of how to promote intercultural and religious cooperation, I'm firmly convinced that education must play a central role, a more and more central role in the process, but for me, just to be very schematic, respecting almost three conditions. First of all, there's perspective for long life learning, not only the beginning of the life, but during all the life. That means that everybody has the right and the duty to continuous education, training, and that includes also the so-called key competencies, such as also citizenship competencies. That's the very big challenge for schools now in Europe, including the recognition of formal and non-formal competencies to be developed not only in schools but also in cooperation with the civil societies and other subjects to integrate the curricula. And you know that not only for the new entrepreneurship, but also for the new citizenship, it's very important that we consider both formal and informal competencies in the curricula of the youth, and also to integrate this aspect of the personal training. The second condition for me is to give more European dimension in education. As we stressed in the cult, you know, we call cult in is like acronymous slang. In the Cultural Committee initiative report that we presented and approved some months ago, the title was Learning You at School. It's a little slogan, but sometimes it is useful to use. Presented by our colleague Damian Dragici, and I want to underline that Damian Dragici is a Roma person. And so he said for him it was a fantastic challenge, no? To cope with this subject, starting from this experience, personal experience. Indeed, it has an increasing relevance, the European dimension in education, knowing and understanding the common history and values of the EU and its member states, but also to practice some experiences at EU level, some as trainings between schools, very practical things. You know that there is a very interesting project named European School Networks that connect 30, not member states, more than member states, 30 states, European states, and 35,000 schools. And they practice every day, also at distance, but also in presence, exchange models of education, different approach, different culture coming from different countries and so on. And the mobility integration promoted by Erasmus programs, you know. The European Volunteering Service. You know that this year is the 20th anniversary of European service, of voluntary service, that included along this period 100,000 youth. And we have to consider this as a very positive experience of a practical exercise of citizenship, proactive citizenship. But also the European project in the field of culture, allowed by Creative Europe program. But also sport. Sport represents a very strong tool for co-integration and for co-education and for integration. As you know, since 2014, the support to sport activities on the ground, activities on the association of the sport, the volunteering type of the sport, in a connection with others in other countries in Europe, has been included under the Erasmus program. Today, after Brexit event, we can better understand that education and culture are the pillars of our feelings of belonging to Europe. On this field, the role of youth and the civic association is more and more strategic, and we must support more than at the national and the European level, as we are doing also through youth agencies that manage the youth program. But we are very aware that we must invest much more in order to allow as many young Europeans and migrants, because they are residents, they are in social citizenship, even they are not anymore juridical citizenship, to participate to this experience of activities of mobility, education, volunteering. For this reason, we asked the Commissioner to enlarge the scope of the European Volunteering Service, looking at the European Civil Service. You know that there is a very promising pilot project on European civil service, but not any country is ready to go because we have not this experience at national level. But there is a pilot project including 4 countries, including mine, Italy, and we want to explore this possibility because this is a very important kind of share a common experience of active citizenship in Europe and also out of Europe, because also on third countries, not only inside. In this framework, we must give a stronger impulse to European broadcasters because sometimes they are silent on this. They don't present what is the meaning, what is the values, what is the to realize the promotion of knowledge and citizenship opportunities offered by Europe. The third condition for me is that we must deeply reconsider different educational models which coexist in Europe. I remember in this regard the open letter published by 4 teachers of St. Denis who, after the Charlie Hebdo attacks, denouncing the victims were their brothers. They say the victims were our brothers, but their killers were our sons. The fact of the increasing radicalization of young people belonging to the second or the third generation of migrants, but also by citizenship, European citizenship, you know that we are more than 4,000 young Europeans in the last months left for fighting Syrian and Iraqi and so on, pose a challenge also to educational systems and integration policies. On this issue, the Ministers of Education have expressed their position in the Paris Declaration on the last March of 2015, committing EU member states themselves and the Union to support the citizenship education, the promotion of common values such as freedom, dignity, human rights, rule of law, and the fight against any form of discrimination. In reaction to this challenge, in CULT committee, we have hosted hearings and other reports, including the one by Julie Ward on this subject. In particular, we have recalled, and I'm very open to your reaction on this, the debate, pedagogical and political, existing now in Europe, on different educational models present in Europe, taking into consideration some limits and some positive aspects. For instance, the limits of the approach of multiculturalism. Multiculturalism is an approach very known in more in Anglo-Saxon countries and focused more on coexistence of communities, but sometimes not on the dialogue between. And the limits of assimilation approach, more present in countries as France, but also Belgium, that on the basis of the common citizenship tends to eliminate from the public space, including schools, any referrals to religious or identity symbols. The most promising perspective stands for me in the intercultural approach, as pedagogical model that valorizes different cultural and religious identities, organizing inside schools optional courses of the language of origin with an experimental teaching to all pupils of non-EU foreign languages, such as Chinese, Arab, and others, promotes training for teachers on the linguistic diversity and on intercultural teaching. My country adopted this approach, even if we are aware that there are very different applications and in very different way, but I imagine, for me, I believe that this is the most difficult but the most promising way. Regarding the interreligious dialogue, I believe that we must start from a consideration. This is my personal opinion, and I'm not engaged in this my committee. Europe is passing through an unprecedented spiritual crisis. And the spiritual nature of the mankind fears the void. And so, the spiritual nature of mankind fears the void. If we don't recognize this fear in a dialogue, in a public space, also in the educational culture, we risk this void being filled by radical answers with fundamentalisms or extremist proposals in the dark side of society. It's interesting in this regard what Abenur Bidar, an existentialist Muslim, professor of religion philosophy at the University of Sorbonne in France, wrote in an open letter to the Muslim world. He recalled both to Muslim brothers and both to West, he said, no? Two things. To the Muslim brothers, he said, for the delay of Islam, for the delay of Islam in recognizing freedom of conscience and the religious and cultural pluralism, and free fundamental rights of women and others. And to the West, for having forgotten the power of faith and religion in good and bad sense, towards life and death, and which does not understand the religion dimension of the Muslim world. That's interesting, because it is an open interrogation for us. For the reason that he called the European politics to a step forward, in order to understand the present time and shape the future, beginning from education to principles and universal values. He said, in Europe we spent a lot of words on freedom and equality, too few words about brotherhood. It's an interesting approach. In these very days, the European Commission, and just to finish, has released a a long-awaited communication, we aspire at this communication, on supporting the prevention of radicalization leading to violent extremism. In this framework, the proposals get on board many of addressing coming from our committee, which will adopt in these days, in months, a mini report on this. And he underlined, I give you only the title, 7 key actions. And we can also consider this because it can be a basis on which in which to include our strategy. First of all, countering terrorist propaganda and illegal hate speech online. Work with the IT industry to stop the spread of illegal content inciting to violence, support development of positive alternative narratives by civil society. We launched a second phase of the new narrative for Europe, and develop media literacy. In this perspective, we are proposing, and maybe we are in agreement with the Commission on this, to enlarge the perspective of the illegal, the extending to online video sharing platforms, an obligation to remove content inciting to hatred, including extremism and terrorist propaganda, and also to avoid the hate speech. That's very important to enforce this, not only to proclaim. Second, addressing radicalization in prisons. We are very interested in just these and other titles. In a very interesting best practice that I know so well in the prison in Bologna since 3 years. The title of this project that became a docu-film is the Dustur. Dustur means constitution. They translate in Arab Italian constitution, and they also compare this with the constitution adopted recently also in the North Mediterranean area, etc. And also there is Islamologist and mediation to understand and to share more the values that is in the deep of this constitution. Third is promoting inclusive education and new common values, as I said before. 4, promoting inclusive, open, and resilient society and reaching out of the people, the young people. 5th, strengthening the international cooperation. You say that we mentioned before, just 1 minute, no, less than 1 minute. You before mentioned refugees. You know that our proposal and our campaign for the inclusion in education of refugees, minors and students, university students. We launched a campaign very important because it was recalled by the United Nations, and we asked to double the amount of resources destinated to humanitarian aids to education. At this moment, they are only 2% of humanitarian aids. After this campaign, after this initiative, now in Europe is a double, more than 4%. 52 million more in these days, this year, dedicated to access to education for refugees minors. You know that we risk a lost generation. And the second is the humanitarian education corridors opening the doors of our university to students in refugees. And last, the strengthening international cooperation is also from this, and also focusing also on the security dimension of this problem. Just sorry because I take a lot of time, but it's more because I'm very passionate on this item, and also because it's very important to share with you what you are thinking about it, also if the only titles not so deep, but in any case, I am open to your question or suggestion. Thank you, sorry for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all your, no, it's okay. Yeah, I'm very happy that you could, name all these very interesting initiatives and emphasize the need on reviewing how we approach education on a European level, but also at the intercultural level, that we can maybe integrate it better. So, and emphasizing brotherhood in Europe and these kind of things, I think is very necessary. Thank you so much for your words. And then let's continue with our next speaker. Our next speaker is Mrs. Erna Hennipa-Tschukes, the former president. Okay, good. She will speak now. Let's welcome Mrs. Hennipa-Tschukes.
Madame la Présidente de la Commission de la Culture et de l'Éducation, je vous remercie beaucoup pour votre intervention et je vous souhaite bonne chance pour introduire le dialogue interreligieux. J'avais fait un amendement en 2008 pour l'année du dialogue interculturel. J'avais proposé pourquoi ne pas l'élargir. La réponse a été l'Union européenne est laïque. On ne saura pas admettre un tel amendement. Alors, mesdames et messieurs, lors de la création de l'Union, c'était en présence des ruines de la Deuxième Guerre mondiale. L'atmosphère pour une meilleure coopération était beaucoup plus favorable et Robert Schuman, dont c'est aujourd'hui le 130e anniversaire de sa naissance, il est né à Luxembourg, soit dit entre parenthèses, sa vision pour une autorité supranationale était propice. Il ne voulait pas seulement coaliser des États, mais il voulait unir des citoyens. Et voilà sa devise. Aujourd'hui, les crises aux frontières de l'Union européenne provoquent la peur de l'autre et le refus du partage. Nous avons bien coalisé les États, mais l'union des citoyens n'est pas encore accomplie. Les valeurs communes, si bien décrites dans le traité et son préambule, auquel ont adhéré 28 pays membres, et ils ont adhéré au préambule, ne retrouvent plus l'enthousiasme des pères fondateurs. Elles représentent cependant le plus grand acquis juridique de l'humanité, jamais atteint, donc de quoi en être fier. L'union économique avance avec une réglementation parfois déroutante, défendant parfois aussi davantage les intérêts des multinationales que ceux des travailleurs. Mais la volonté de progresser tous ensemble vers un espace commun de sécurité et de justice est en recul. Alors comment réagir face à ces égoïsmes d'une société civile en attente, société hélas de plus en plus sans repères et de moins en moins préparée aux principes énoncés dans nos textes communs. L'Union européenne a été très ambitieuse dans sa charte des droits fondamentaux avec l'idéal de tolérance et d'acceptation de chaque citoyen dans le respect de sa dignité, indépendant de son appartenance idéologique ou religieuse. Les héritages culturels, religieux et humanistes de l'Europe, tels qu'avancés dans le préambule du traité, risquent de ne plus être perçus comme des fondements communs. Alors jeune, seulement de 70 ans, l'histoire de l'Union européenne puisait sa force dans la spiritualité des siècles précédents, dont témoignent les écrivains, les œuvres d'art, les musiciens, les 28 pays membres. L'amour du prochain, le pardon à l'ennemi, était bien à la table de négociation de Robert Schuman et de Konrad Adenauer. Alors réapprendre cette histoire, non pas avec l'énumération des victoires militaires des uns, qui sont les échecs des autres, mais en tenant compte de l'acquis commun. Voilà une première mission pour l'éducation des jeunes et des moins jeunes. Le Conseil de l'Europe a retenu dans ses conclusions de l'année du dialogue des cultures une priorité pour un enseignement de l'histoire qui tiendrait compte de celle du pays voisin. Une telle démarche commune avait trouvé un écho dans un manuel franco-allemand édité en 2006. C'était un projet pilote qui est resté malheureusement unique en son genre jusqu'à présent. Soumise au changement de la société, à la globalisation et à la digitalisation, l'éducation reste toujours un pilier de la société. Cependant, les compétences communes sont très limitées, car l'article 165 des traités exclut toute harmonisation des dispositions législatives et réglementaires des États membres. Et je ne m'abuse, Madame la Présidente, à relever les chiffres que vous avez nommés, 100 000 étudiants en mobilité sur 500 000. Oui, mais sur l'ensemble d'une population de 500 millions, c'est pas beaucoup. Alors il faudra... Oui. Ah. On peut être fier de nos acquis, mais il faut toujours voir ce qui reste comme ça encore à faire. Alors, la notion de famille, le havre de paix, pour les très jeunes et aussi les très vieux, ne peut plus être considéré comme un modèle unique. Et les législations sur le mariage ont été soumises à des changements fondamentaux dans certains pays. Ils ont ainsi obligé les services juridiques de l'Union européenne à prévoir des passerelles pour agencer les droits et devoirs d'un pays à l'autre. Alors l'acceptation de la culture de chacun, en respectant la législation propre à chaque nation, nous met à la croisée des chemins. Le débat sur l'islam fait partie des réflexions sur ces changements profonds. Alors il y a les questions sur le droit des femmes, de son indépendance, de son autonomie. Serait-il en contradiction avec des principes religieux? L'évolution de l'éducation en famille et cet éclatement de la vie familiale exigent notre engagement pour les valeurs que nous avons acceptées comme les nôtres. Devenue chose publique, l'éducation est-elle encore à la hauteur des capacités des êtres humains? Mendelssohn, qui compose à l'âge de 17 ans le songe d'une nuit d'été. Mozart serait-il devenu le génie sans l'éducation de son père? Ou même Alexandre le Grand, qui à 18 ans a conquis un empire. Ils se sont épanouis bien avant l'âge de la fin de l'obligation scolaire. Alors certes, notre époque fait aussi fi à tous les systèmes scolaires si nous considérons un Steve Jobs, inventeur de l'ordinateur sans avoir été universitaire chevronné. Mais la plus grande déviation s'est infiltrée dans les textes de l'Union européenne, avec le terme de l'employability. Employabilité. L'éducation publique, productrice de main-d'œuvre, n'est à part réduite au bourrage de crâne, à la concurrence à force de tests européens, genre PISA, axés sur des normes limitées, sans prendre en compte la diversité des différents systèmes. Certes, la révolution technologique s'est imposée avec force et conviction, et désormais, on n'apprend même plus à écrire à la main, mais à l'ordinateur, comme en Finlande, à partir de la rentrée prochaine. L'ancien idéal de la Bildung, c'est un terme que je n'arrive pas à traduire. La Bildung a été soumis aux exigences du tout économique. Et voilà le